Ministers, deacons, trustees, missionary boards, priests got stuck trying to untangle the language of blame. After all, who do we blame when a child is transfused with tainted blood? Do you blame the child or a person who was sick and he needed a transfusion? Do you blame the person who cared so much for humanity he sought to have his life-saving blood stored for another? Do you blame the parents of children born with sickle cell anemia for loving each other? Do you blame black people for expressing love, seeking love through the most intimate way possible? The call for resources, and so many people began to join the call for resources, monetary and otherwise, to fight this thing called HIV and AIDS. Only as the various segments of the black community and all interested in survival of the humanity began talking about the allocations of resources so we might search for a cure, the idea of saving oneself before saving anyone else seemed to really take hold. This reaction makes sense when you realize most everyday persons in the black community figured the previous discussion wasn't about him. White-dominated organizations were the first organizations ready to fight the disease, and since media coverage allowed them to be seen as the most immediately affected, there was no opposition to where the resources were going. Blacks who believed it was never about them were all right with the idea of affected directing, managing resources for the disease. Since those early days, some really amazing strides have been made. Millions of dollars have been allocated. Neonatal maternal transmission has gotten very close to eradication. Interesting, the faces of those infected and affected by HIV has grown browner, but there's been no change in where the main resources have traveled. But now blacks realize this is about them as well. But because there's been no shift in the resource allocation, management, and coordination, the everyday person figures no one really cares. Why the shift, the path of resources now on the face of it? One could feel justified in asking, where's the problem in having those who directed and managed the resources continue to do so? There is no way of determining if this is an inherited problem. Agencies long charged with the care and curing of the black community have been predominantly white, and the shakers of policy and managers of resources have always attempted to do what is best for blacks, haven't they? This is an argumental point, and there is some validity to the notion that those receiving resources have worked to get the money to those most affected. But there's no way of actually knowing if there is some inherited problems in who gets, distributes, manages the resources. Finding an agency trying to move the allocations and management resources to agencies headed by blacks and other people of color is difficult, if not impossible. There are no government agencies challenging the idea those always directing and managing resources should be more.